I thought we could take a little bit of time and talk about what's on your mind about what's going on in marketing today and what you talk about. I hear you talk about this notion of closed loop marketing and marketing performance management. Maybe you'll help us understand what's on top of mind for Chief Marketing Officer. And if you'd like to pick an industry to have that conversation, I'm happy to do that.
Sure.
And then ultimately, I'd like to sort of capture this conversation in a new way to help us visualize that closed loop.
Okay, sounds great. I think, in terms of where my mind goes, it's just a little bit of history is important in terms of like how we got to today. I've been in industry 23 plus years now, primarily helping marketers get to where they want to go. If I go back to like 1997, when I graduated, the challenge back then was how can marketers try to keep up with consumers in terms of the channels that consumers were adopting to leverage and consume brands. And so if you think about the growth of the internet, digital channels, the mobile revolution, social media revolution, there's just been a tremendous amount of execution technology that is needed to be built out over the last 20 plus years on the marketing side. The problem is that other departments went through that phase in the 80s and the 90s.
Like finance.
Finance, the kind of core accounting systems on the back end, supply chain with core ERP implementations. And so, the last 20 years for those departments has been really figuring out how to upgrade their enterprise planning capabilities. Essentially, the brain that governs how you use your executional technologies. So, here we are today in the 2020s, and marketing has this very sophisticated, massive amount of apps and technologies to execute. But in 99% of cases right now, marketing's planning brain is still essentially an Excel spreadsheet from the 1980s.
Yeah.
And so what I'm seeing right now is competitive advantage with marketers and building brand awareness and connection and market share and all the other traditional KPIs that marketers use. That competitive differentiation is now shifting towards how good is your planning brain and how's that planning brain interconnecting back into finance, back into supply chain, back into sales. And that's kind of the new frontier. For other departments, it's the attitude is what's taking you so long. So there's a lot of historical friction, like between finance and marketing or marketing and sales. I look at it a little bit differently. I feel like a lot of that friction is due to literally the planning brain still being in the spreadsheet world. And that leads to low visibility, bad data, inability to kind of connect the dots in a way that the other departments need. But in the spirit of empathy, it's not like marketing leaders like the current state of affairs. Right. It's just that they've had their hands full building out those marketing execution technologies. That has been priority number one. Now that that's built out and you're kind of hitting the law of diminishing returns, now the priority can shift to, okay, let's catch up with the other departments, upgrade our enterprise planning brain, get out of those 1980 spreadsheets, and we're going to be able to more effectively close the loop between the dollars that were given from finance, how we think about connecting those dollars in that budget to our strategic goals, how we set those goals, and how those goals then cascade down into actual initiatives.
Yep.
And then what happened?
And results too.
And results.
Yeah.
So how do we connect the results back with a lot more specificity than we've been able to do in the past?
Beautiful. Let's try and get specific. I'd love to pick your brain. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to look at a little methodology we have to do that. What I really want to do is sort of pick your brain and drill another level down and see what some of those drivers are of what we're talking about. And so I'm just going to use this construct. It's we call it a blueprint. And what we're trying to do is put the whole sort of closed loop on one sheet of paper. So it includes finance and corporate marketing, trade promotion, demand and merchandising, all the way down to retailer and consumer. Those are sort of the key stakeholders in this conversation. And so we want to learn how they're interconnected and why. And so in order to do that, we also divide this conversation into three layers. The strategic layer across the top. What does CMO drive? What does CFO care about? What's the company's profitability and revenue growth goals? And then an operational layer to think about, well, who's going to execute on that strategy? Who's responsible? The directors and senior managers, campaign managers, brand managers to deliver. And then finally, on the tactical execution level, the day-to-day campaign and unaided awareness and advertising and all the things that happen to execute. So we're trying to connect strategy to execution and show it on one sheet of paper. So as you were speaking, I wrote down revenue growth and profitability as well as brand effectiveness. The first place I like to start is let's just pick brand. Who owns the brand? I assume it's brand managers and ultimately CMO. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think in the context of a food and beverage company, I really believe that the CMO actually owns the consumer and needs to understand the consumer and everything that consumer wants and needs, and then is trying to align how the company is going to respond to those consumer needs. And so by owning the consumer, there's obviously a huge amount of information that needs to be analyzed to understand every component of the quote consumer. And the consumer may change from brand to brand, product to product. So really understanding those kind of key components that drive consumer behavior.
For example, loyalty is a big one from the consumer's perspective, right? Loyalty to brand. And assortment and availability and price. Is that fair?
I think there's a lot of traditional components like you're mentioning.
Yeah.
Is this the product that meets my price point as a consumer? Is it available where I want it and where I need it? Is it in the right format that I like to consume it?
Can I call that assortment? Is that fair?
Sure, yeah, absolutely. But I think, especially in today's world, there's additional components like, is this brand aligned with my personal values?
Oh, right.
Right. So I think there's a lot more for a CMO to monitor, be concerned about in today's world, especially in the digital age, where small voices can be amplified very quickly. But again, it all comes down to, does the CMO actually own the consumer? And I think that the answer to that is 100% yes. As a result, the CMO also owns the brand, because the brand strategy is aligned with consumer need. And then the question is, how do you execute on getting that brand out into the marketplace in order to drive brand engagement with consumers, positive brand engagement with consumers, and ultimately that cascades into kind of the traditional measures of corporate success, revenue, profit margin, et cetera.
I'm not familiar with that term brand engagement, but I think I understand just by how you say it, that it's really, do I go look for it? Do I seek it out? Does it come to me? Is it fed to me? Like advertising about that brand?
It's more, yes, that's kind of like the push part of it, but the engagement part is how do I as a consumer want to actually interact with this brand? So do I buy it frequently, for example, in the context of shopping in the store? Do I select it 100% of the time? But there's the other piece of that is brand engagement in regards to campaigns. So like this in social media, how am I engaging with the brand? Am I liking things? Am I sharing things? How often do I talk about the brand personally to other people in my particular sphere of influence? And so that's become a huge part of, it's a consumer marketing, because each person out there can actually be an ambassador for a brand now, or they can be a brand's worst enemy.
Right.
So carefully monitoring that situation is going to be key. And so you have your strategic objectives, which would be, in a perfect world, everyone loves my brands. Everyone uses my brands all the time. And everyone talks about my brands to everybody else. But we live in an imperfect world. So how do we maximize the probability of trying to get to that, state of nirvana?
Which is, I think one of the states of nirvana is market share. I'm trying to steal market share away from my competitors. I'm trying to grow my own. I'm trying to take advantage of what's possible.
I think that's right. And, especially in the context of like a food and beverage company, if you think about like how consumer tastes have shifted over the decades, the growth of a heavy awareness around health, for example, and how that particular consumer need, intersects with certain brands in a negative way. Let's say very sugary beverages. That's a negative correlation. But the CMO would then be looking at, okay, we're going to launch a bunch of new product lines. It may just be water, different variations of water, or electrolyte drinks, or things like that. So you've got a healthy segment. You've got a segment that doesn't prioritize health as much. They prioritize the delicious, sweet tasting drinks. And so how do you again align towards those particular brands and consumers? One of the key things here is the CMO is looking across the whole brand portfolio, the whole product portfolio, and trying to figure out, do we maintain these products? Can we continue to improve market share in these products? Have certain products kind of like hit the law of diminishing returns, but we still keep them there? Our brands
lost leaders, bundling, all those kinds of packaging concerns.
Exactly. And how does that intersect with my retail partners
that
I sell through? So the whole, what's my mix? How is that mix trying to maximize market share across every different type of consumer? How does that mix intersect with the competitors that we're facing in the marketplace? How does that mix intersect with, potentially supply chain challenges that I could have? So I'm trying to manage all of that while executing against the brand promise. And of course, the CMO has a large team of people.
Yes.
That is very focused maybe on one brand or one set of products under a particular brand. So they're going to be looking at the world through that lens, while the CMO is looking across the overall lens of all the products and brands.
So all this is going on in marketing. We're trying to get to the consumer. We're trying to expand market share. Why I'm going to call it new, but I know it's not new. Why the new emphasis on connection back to finance?
So historically, there's always been this natural tension between finance and marketing, especially in the context of like a B2C consumer packaged goods, food and beverage style, because the manufacturer of those goods doesn't own the consumer at the point of sale typically. And so there's always this issue of, did this marketing spend actually cause that consumer to buy our products? And from a marketer's standpoint, everything about the brand, every sale is going to be connected back in some way to the brand marketing that I have done in the marketplace, that my teams have done in the marketplace. The problem is that finance doesn't necessarily believe that. And so finance, as the ultimate arbiter of who gets what budget, is looking at it and saying, should I give more money to marketing? Should I give less money to marketing? Marketing has a challenge of defending its budget, asking for and defending and asking for more. And I think historically the challenge has been marketing hasn't been able to defend with the specificity and the language that finance desires, that finance wants. And I think it's very unfair on marketers, because marketers are having to do a tremendous amount with very few resources compared to the charter that they have. And so when they're challenged, Like, I'm not sure that the money we've given you, that you've used it wisely. It's hard not to personalize that. I think that there's a core issue that underlines all of this. And it kind of goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning. Marketers have been using these 1980s tools like spreadsheets in order to do their strategic planning. Meanwhile, finance has graduated to enterprise planning software.
Sure.
And that disconnect between trying to manage life departmentally in a spreadsheet versus other departments that are managing life in enterprise planning software, there's a massive disconnect. And the people that are at a deficit, when they come to the table to discuss budget, to discuss what's worked, are the people that are bringing a spreadsheet from the 80s to the table.
Wow.
And so
you can't get down to, even if you need to, SKU level or even across the brand or down to sort of like the spend by brand.
even if you do, you're doing it months too late. And so this concept of closed loop marketing is, how do you connect the dots between the money that finance gave you, cutting up that money across strategic priorities, cascading that money down into specific purses that are going to be devoted to specific types of campaigns, particular products, particular geos, and then executing campaign-wise against those particular purses of money, taking all the analytics and tying that back and doing it in a way that finance says, I get it. We gave you this much money, we generated this much sales, and I actually see all the dots that happen between those two items.
Yeah.
And I see marketing's influence across all of those. I now see the funnel in the way that I need to see it in order to justify and feel good about the spend. And that disconnect, in my personal experience, has been really driven by the planning brain on the marketing side being captured in spreadsheets, because spreadsheets, it's very difficult to connect that world and that technology into the MarTech systems that I use to execute.
Yeah.
And so what ends up happening is it all has to be done manually.
Yep.
And that manual nature causes major delays. And so finance is sitting there going, why don't you have the answers?
Yeah.
And then even when marketing comes to the table with their spreadsheets, finance doesn't trust the data in the spreadsheets. It's old, or what version are we looking at? So
we need a common set of data with common rules, common hierarchies, common algorithms, collaborated, as we can see already in this tool, across finance, marketing, trade, demand, merchandising, retailer, all the way down to consumer.
I think that's right. And I think for the CMO, you've got the issue of, how does my team drive brand engagement and consumer sentiment outside the store?
Yeah.
Through all of my corporate marketing programs.
Yeah.
And then how do I actually drive that inside the store with my trade promotions?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to conquer both territories in a positive way for the consumer.
Yeah.
It's very complicated. And most companies, that kind of corporate marketing is disconnected from the trade promotion side. Again, because those systems are different.
Yeah.
And they're really relying on spreadsheets to be the glue.
Yeah.
And it's a very poor form of glue.
For sure. I got it. I'm going to stop you for a second and just, first of all, thank you for those insights. And they're broad and strategic. I'd like to have another sit down with you and get into I know you're fond of talking about crawl, walk, and run. I want to see what that would look like in the future when marketing gets up to speed where finance is with data and systems and collaboration, and then tell the story again through systems, if that's okay with you.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you, Geoff. Brilliant.
Yeah, thank you.